The Psychology of Debt: How Ancient Athens Fell into Financial Slavery, 4th century BC. When people think of ancient Athens, they imagine freedom, philosophy, art, and the birth of democracy. They imagine open debates and a society built on the sacred principle of participation. But history hides a far more unsettling story beneath the marble ruins. What we rarely imagine is the invisible chain that eventually bound the city-state: debt. Long before modern central banks or credit cards, Athens discovered a dangerous truth. Debt can quietly transform free citizens into dependent subjects without a single drop of blood being spilled. The illusion of perpetual prosperity. In the 4th century BC, Athens was no longer the unrivaled power that had once crushed the Persian Empire. Decades of exhausting conflict, including the Peloponnesian War, had drained its legendary treasury. Trade routes became unstable, and maintaining political influence across the Aegean became an expensive burden that the city's actual productivity could no longer support. To preserve its prestige and its lavish way of life, Athens did what countless nations would later do. It borrowed against a future that had not yet arrived. At first, debt felt harmless. Loans funded the glorious trireme fleets and kept public institutions functioning. Leaders reassured the populace that this borrowing was a temporary bridge to a new era of growth. They promised that prosperity would return and the burden would be manageable. The first trap: optimism and denial. This is the first psychological trap of debt: optimism. Debt always feels safe at the beginning because its consequences are delayed. The benefits, the cash, the infrastructure, the feeling of wealth, are immediate. The pain is a distant shadow. As Athens' obligations grew, the city's priorities shifted. Political decisions were no longer shaped by civic ideals, but by the cold math of financial necessity. When a society owes more than it produces, the creditor becomes the true sovereign. Taxes increased, public lands were sold, and economic pressure became the primary tool of governance. Slowly, democracy began to hollow out. The people still voted, but their choices were increasingly dictated by what the lenders would allow. The decay of the citizen-mind debt changed human behavior. Athenian leaders stopped thinking in terms of generations and began thinking in payment cycles. Long-term stability was sacrificed for short-term survival. Every decision became reactive. Ordinary citizens felt this erosion directly. Small farmers, the backbone of the Athenian infantry, began losing their land when they could not meet interest obligations. Citizens who once participated freely in political life became economically dependent on the elites who held their markers. This leads to the second psychological trap: normalization. As debt became a permanent feature of life, people adapted. They lowered their expectations and accepted restrictions on their rights. They convinced themselves that this state of dependence was simply the new reality. Adaptation felt rational, but adaptation to decay is a slow-motion suicide. By adapting, the Athenians slowly erased their own capacity for resistance. The slow road to submission. The real mystery of collapse is why people stay loyal to systems that are clearly deteriorating. The answer lies in the human brain's desire to protect stability. When reality threatens our comfort, we choose reinterpretation over confrontation. We see the cracks, but we tell ourselves the structure is still safe. Debt did not conquer Athens with foreign armies. It conquered through contracts, ledgers, and the psychological surrender of its people. By the time Athens fell under Macedonian dominance, its inner freedom was already a ghost. Military defeat was not the cause of the fall. It was merely the final signature on a document written decades earlier. The timeless lesson. The lesson of the 4th century BC is hauntingly relevant. Debt does not destroy societies only when it is large. It destroys them when it becomes unavoidable. When people believe there is no exit, they stop demanding change. They stop imagining alternatives. Athens teaches us that financial dependence always precedes political submission. Once dependence becomes normal, the final collapse no longer feels like a shock. It feels like an inevitability. We often say, "We didn't know it would get this bad," but history suggests we always know. We just choose not to look until the lights go out.